everyone, and welcome to another episode of Influencing Safety with Bill Martin, the president and CEO of Think Tank Project, LLC. I'm Kate Wade, the editor of Incident Prevention Magazine, and your host for this podcast. Today, Bill and I are going to be talking about what he sees as the way forward, the things we need to focus on and do to lower the rates of significant injuries and deaths in our industry. Good morning, Bill, and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Morning, Kate. Nice to see you in at least 2D.
Right. I've also got Levi here, my little buddy, just so you know, he's in the background.
Oh, cool. So yeah, he likes the podcast. And we have the remnants of Hurricane Debbie here. So if you hear something in the background, it's just a little rain.
Okay. So we got things going on here this morning, huh?
Yeah.
Well, so talk to me a little bit about the way forward as you see it in our industry.
So this is a loaded podcast question.
Yes.
And I think we need to preempt this.
Okay.
Your listeners right now, you know, everyone that's listening has best intentions. We're trying to figure out. I don't know anyone that comes to work to get hurt or anybody that wants anyone to get hurt. It's a product of something we're doing, and we're trying to find what we can do to reduce them. And it's all the best intentions. Some of the smartest people I know are writing excellent articles, and we're having conferences all over the country. But the statistics still stand. About 12 years of the same number of serious injuries and fatalities in our country. And what happens when that happens, we start to blame the workers, we start to blame things because how can it possibly happen? We have all this really good stuff in place. We've taught you human performance and the HOP principles and the hierarchy of controls and the Swiss cheese model by James Reason. We've had these conferences and we brought you all together. How can it still be happening? What I want to warn, this is a warning for your listeners. I'm going to be straight here. And you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but please, if you can refrain from defending your assumption or judging me or yourself, they can just consider what I'm talking about. Because if we want to change something at work needs to change. It seems simple, right? So let me give you an example. I was just recently at a conference. And really good conference, very heartfelt. They had some good motivational speakers with someone who had a serious injury and the effect on his family. It was really, really good, and you could tell the people were interested and it touched a part of their heart. And all over the country, we're having that. We'd like to have people come in that have suffered, so that we can empathize with them and feel that what they went through, in hopes to avoid us going through it. Yet nothing changes and we still go through it. And the reason for that is because motivation without an action doesn't change anything. And that's hard for people to hear. With best intentions, we want to try to motivate people. I'm going to quote you what a leader of an organization said at a recent event that I was at.
Okay.
After telling a story about his past and how he still remembers every detail of a serious injury of a coworker from 30 years ago, He said, "Now listen, I want you to listen to me," he said. "Never take shortcuts. Never be in a hurry. Always look out for each other. Don't be complacent. And if you see something, say something." And I felt it. And then one of his managers got up and said, "I'm going to repeat, don't be complacent. Make sure everyone is fully engaged. Identify all hazards. Have a plan in place. And for God's sake, use situational awareness." And you could see everybody nod.
Mm-hmm.
And the articles I'm reading, really well written articles, even in IP magazine, with really good the what we need to do is identified, even with recent studies they've done on their own, and looked at 100 people here and 110 people there. The what is clear. The how to do it is almost always missing. Because if the what to do is correct, never take shortcuts. That's what we shouldn't do. How do you do that? How do you convince a workforce not to take a shortcut?
Especially when there's, production on the line. It's like you want to be able to meet the timeline and do all these things. How do you do all that and do it the safest way possible at the same time?
So then there's the motivational speaker wrote up 3 points, a slide with 3 points on why things happen. They happen because we say, I do this all the time. Or this is how I've always done it. Or this will never happen to me, so I'm not worried about it. I did it this way last time, it worked fine. So I got to ask you, Kate, of all the things I just mentioned, in the last 12 years, do you think anybody else said that to a group of people?
I suspect one or two have said it to a group of people.
So it's with best intentions, right? We want to cure the disease. But until we translate the language of the disease to the language of the worker, they can't interpret it or translate it to a change at work. Mm-hmm. Something needs to change at work. So the way forward has to do not with the great information. We've got great information. It has to do with our ability to create a synchrony of our workforce so the message gets through. Mm-hmm. I talk sometimes about synchronicity. Carl Jung talked about it. There's it's in neuroscience and physics that we synchronize as humans and we aren't aware of it. Tan Lee from Neurogeneration did a study with EEG headsets, electroencephalogram, and when you make eye contact, your brainwaves synchronize. Electroencephalogram is electricity, right? So when we connect electrically. Right? It takes many brains to make a mind. We have our own singular brain, but my mind right now is connected to yours, even though we're going through a TV screen. Mm-hmm. Right? And if you're listening to this, your mind is now connected to ours, and you're creating assumptions and associations. And if I say something that puts you in defense, you're like, well, I don't agree with that. It's okay. You don't need to agree with it. We just need to try to understand why we think this might be something to do with the problem. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes absolute sense.
So we rely on continuity in the industry, heavy reliance on continuity, because an electrical conductor has to have continuity in order for you to get power. That's right. And as soon as you have a break in continuity, your power goes out. And then we send out crews to fix it. There's a fault in a substation or in an underground. It's because of lack of continuity of the conductor. Well, the information that we have has electrical continuity. And once it gets to the workforce, if we're not holding hands in our minds, we're not connected. The information has no continuity to flow through the workforce. So the last standing resistor to this information is the workforce. So the way forward is we need to help synchronize the workforce. That sounds really... That even when I just said that, just sounds stupid.
Well, it also sounds a little nebulous too. Also,
right. So let's look at I've mentioned this before, but let's look at biology. Mm-hmm. Let's look at Staphylococcus aureus bacteria.
Okay.
You get a staph infection. Mm-hmm. We all have those bacteria in us all the time. But until we're in a weakened condition, our body will pick them off, because our body also has a budget, right? Your brain has a budget. It's 2% of your body weight and uses 25% of your resources. Has a budget on how much information it allows you to burn, right? So I was listening at another conference. When you're driving, you need to be conscious the whole time. That's not even close to true. We can't do that. We have a brain budget. Our brain's job is to make things automatic. We are so automatic and so good at driving, we can carry on a conversation and completely be 3 miles past our exit before we realize we are even there. And we see that as a bad thing. I see it as a high level of competency. that we can drive 3 miles past an exit we didn't even know we were going by. That's right.
Yeah.
That's a high level of competency. So this idea that we have to be alert and attentive the whole time is a fallacy. That's not the way our human works. 99% of what our brain does is automatic. So if we can affect that part, our brain makes decisions without us, right? That thought that comes to your mind without your permission, right, comes from there. And then we can choose. We have a choice to act on it or not.
Since you've started talking about that to me, about how, like, if something pops into our brain, like, the number of times that I will be like, damn it, I have to do this thing now because it came in my brain, and I know if I don't, and something dumb happens, I'll be kicking myself, and I'll think about how Bill told me that, like, I need to pay attention. And so I do now, and I think like you always say too, you don't know what's not going to happen as a result of the thing that you did. So I'm just hoping I'm keeping myself safer, my family safer, by doing these little things. You know what I mean?
And if we have a workforce, what we do is we blow each other off, right? Like you have a guy with 20 years and a guy with 9 years, and the guy with 9 years says, I'm a little concerned about that. Don't worry, we should be fine. I've done this 1,000 times. That's our first move, because our brain doesn't want to deal with it because it has a budget, right? But like I just said to Nick, right, as we started this podcast, and Nick had an idea for the podcast, and I said, that's a good idea, Nick. You know why? Why? Because it came from you, and you have a lot of experience in this. So because that idea came to you with all that experience, we should try it, because it doesn't matter if you're wrong. What matters is what we will learn from trying that thing, right? So we have this thing about being right. Well, I'm right and you're wrong. Who cares, right? And as long as we maintain that, we break synchrony. We can't lock together when we're in competition for who's right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It moves us to defense. Mm-hmm. Defense creates rationalization and justification. And that's always about something in the past. And I don't know, we've talked about this, Kate. Did you know that we can't change the past?
What?
We can only, our chance to change the future is right now. Whoops, lost that opportunity. Now it's back, right? Our chance to change tomorrow is today. So that whole thing about justification and rationalization is kind of a waste of time unless we're learning from it. But if it's just to defend yourself, it's a waste of time. And if we learn that putting people in defense causes that, then we can use words like how and what. Those are clean words. You can look that up in a Google clean questions. Maybe we'll do a podcast on that sometime. But how did you see that working out, Joe? And what could we do to get a better outcome? That moves you forward with logic, reason, and intuition, not backwards with defense. Mm-hmm. So the way forward in my mind is, how do we create such a deep connection between us that mm-hmm. we're synchronized so we can recognize the disruption, right?
Mm-hmm. So what are your ideas on this? Like, so, you're talking about having an actual, like, activity, like something to do, like, hey, the meeting was great. What are we going to do on Monday to start changing things or start implementing this? What kind of ideas do you have? We've talked about the synchrony in the past. We've talked about, the eye contact and the having everybody speak. And I'm assuming these are the same kinds of ideas that are going to move us forward. What do you think? And, like, how do we implement that? Because I'm not sure that it's being implemented anywhere.
So I wish I could record what you just said. Actually, we are. Isn't that cool? But if I'm a CEO or a manager listening to that question, I should be asking that question of my workers, because they have the skin in the game, and often they have an idea, but the 4 words we don't ask them is, hey, what do you think? Mm-hmm. What do you think? What kind of thing do you think we could do? So, and another way to do this would be to model some things. And we've talked about this, and I'll talk about it again today, because the way forward has to do with modeling things that create the environment that allow us to sync, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like, hey, everybody, you need to synchronize. You take your heads together. That's just like saying, hey, the here for complacency is don't be complacent.
Well,
you lost focus. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I had another question too, which is, I think in like smaller organizations, the tactics that you talk about can be implemented relatively easily. But what happens when you have like a large, like investor-owned utility, where I feel like there's more like layers, of red tape and more layers between the people who are in like the C-suite and the people who are in the field doing the work? How do you get it in there when you're dealing with so many layers?
It's a change of mindset. We might have said this before. You plant corn, you get corn. Okay. So I'll give you an example. I was on a call with a major utility and a small contractor. They were calling to find out something about the small contractor that I was working with is doing, because they were doing some cool improvements. And when they came on, the large contractor had it put on the screen, because it was a virtual, 9 bullet points of what they wanted to talk about. Well, that's nice, but they were calling to find out about what the small contractor what they were doing. And rather than ask them for their input, they immediately biased the whole conversation to satisfy their 9 bullet points. Right? So the change in mindset has to be to ask the question first. Right? So I need to see so tell me, what do you think that you're doing differently that we could maybe try? And maybe we should experiment with it, and then we can get together and see what happens, But if I give you my 9 bullet points, this is what we're going to do. And that's what's happening with a lot of these great things that we're writing about. We're writing about really good ideas without giving an action, right? Mm-hmm. And if we create an action that's like a social experiment, then we shouldn't be concerned about the outcome. We should be interested in it. And if I create a synchronized team, I can go to your team right here at IP. I can come in and say, look, you guys, I have something I want to try, but if we can all get on the same side of the rudder and try this, we can at least find what happens. Are you guys into it? And then guys will say yes, because you're polite. Right? And then I'll give you that thing and I'd say, so I want you to test and evaluate this week. And every week for the next month, I want you to report back your findings to your supervisor. And then we'll come back on and talk about what you found out. And is it of value, or can we tweak it to make it of value? Right? And if it's not of value, you won't use it anyway. So let's toss it. Mm-hmm. So I do social experiments all the time, and I shouldn't tell people this, but I'm going to. Okay. Often I'll hand something out, a simple something, to the whole group.
Like the corn seed?
Yeah, that or a card, a 3x5 card with a priming message on it, and I'll explain how it works. And the reasons I do that is to see how many I pick up on the table at the end. Mm. Right?
Like who wasn't into it, who wasn't doing anything with it.
And then my challenge is, how did I not connect with them? Yeah. It's not my responsibility. These people are victims of the environment. Right? So I said this recently, these major utilities that are listening right now, they have to be careful of the environment they're creating. As soon as you fire a subcontractor because they make a mistake, you have wounded a human. That human shows up working for another contractor or the same contractor somewhere else. But now you'll hear them say this, look at you guys, I'm just here for my 10 hours on my paycheck. Just leave me alone. Because now that person has been wounded and they're only loyal to themselves. Mm-hmm. That person is a disruption, and I will not work with him. When I hear that, and I advise anyone listening right now, and you might take this personal if this is you saying it. I'm sorry. I'm really not, but I'm going to say I'm sorry. If you are saying that, stop. Because you are not only loyal to yourself. If you're only loyal to yourself, I have no use for you on my team. Mm-hmm. Imagine an Olympic team right now in the Olympics where one guy says, hey, dudes, I'm just here for the Olympics.
Oh, yeah, like one of the synchronized swimmers who's just like yelling me along. Right?
Yeah, right. I mean, so when you start to synchronize your team, you recognize that guy. And then your job is to help that person become the best version of themselves. Hey, let me help you. We really can't have you here if this is your only loyal to yourself. What can I do to help you get connected to this group? And here's you mentioned some tactics. Here's one. If I got a bunch of guys, I'm going to little call out to these storm companies right now that are pulling people together who don't know each other to throw them in line trucks to go to storms. Something is going to happen eventually, and they won't realize the reason is that they didn't synchronize them, because they're all different people, and the safety in storms is pretty high because there's a high level of interest, and your spidey sense is up, right? So I know that's a technical term, right? So
yes,
but let's say we're waiting in a parking lot for the utility to get their act together, as usually that happens, because usually you sit there for 4 hours while you're waiting for the work that you just drove by on the way in. And I'm not trying to be that. I just spent 20 years doing it, so I know that happens. What if you got them out and say, hey, let's just introduce ourselves? And they go around the group and you say, all right, give me your name and where you're from. And they go around, hey, let's do that again. But tell me your first name and something you are. And you'll see them immediately look puzzled and stop. And they'll look up to the right and the left to search their brain. What do you mean something I am? And somebody said that to me once, and I said, well, you are a lot of things. I just want to know what floats to the top, dude. You know, what's something you are? And I just did it in a talk recently. And one guy said, well, I am adventurous. And what are you? I'm a dad. What are you? I'm a musician. And now I know everybody on my workforce at a second level deep. Right? And if you want to go deeper because you're bored, you can play the game. Let's play a game up. 2 truths and a lie. What's that? Let's stand in a circle. And you tell me 3 things about yourself. Make one of them a lie. Let's see if we can figure out which one it is. And we'll laugh. Laughter produces oxytocin, which causes trust and bonding. And we'll learn 2 things that are true about each of these people. And now when I'm working with you, Kate, and you're the musician, and I see you working out your gloves on something where you can get pinched, and say, hey, dude, what? I said, you can have trouble playing that guitar with those stubby fingers. Right? Because yes. And that comes to my mind without my permission, because your subconscious can't not know the things it just heard. Right? We've done this. Daniel Kahneman, don't think of a white bear. You know?
Right. And I'm obviously thinking of a white bear right now. Yeah.
As is every one of your audience, right?
Yeah.
So don't know that I'm a musician. You can't do it, right? So when we start to connect, our subconscious starts calculating and putting all this stuff together. And then we start to see situations. I'm a dad. Hey, listen, would your kid allow you to do it that way? Right? Hey, listen, you're about to take a shortcut there. I see it. You don't think you need another hose? Maybe you should call your kid and ask him first. But if I don't even know you're a dad, that's never showing up. Right? So that's just one simple tactic that creates synchrony, right? And if you're listening to an orchestra and they're all playing a different tune, it's just total chaos. But if you're listening to an orchestra that's practiced together and they're synchronized, they're beautiful until that French horn plays the wrong note. And that disruption shows up like a sore thumb. That's what I'm talking about. Let's say you have a team of, you have one of these companies, a storm company, and you start synchronizing your team early, right? You start to notice the guy that's out of sync. Guy might have something going on at home. He could have, he might have defaulted on his kid's tuition payment. He might not be feeling well. 15% of our workforce is addicted to something. You know what I mean?
Drugs or alcohol. Is that what? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're fallible. We're humans, right? And we are laser focused on preventing that thing. We're going to identify every hazard because we don't want you to get hurt. And that's all very purposeful and with great best intentions. But as I said before, the number 1 killer of our workforce between age 24 and 44 is drugs and alcohol, and the number 2 is suicide, right? And there was 2 in my state in the last 6 months, suicides. If we are connected at a deeper level, maybe we could figure out a way to connect at a level where we can be there for each other and create an environment where we are connected and there's continuity between us, because I hear we are a brother's keeper. They don't see it. And then when I speak, and it's contagious too, because the chemicals that we release when we're happy are different than the ones when we're frustrated. And when I hand out these cards, usually if 1 person or 2 people at the table don't take them, nobody does. Because it's not cool. Well, those guys are in charge. They're the leaders. If they're not taking those cards, this must be stupid.
Because we're way too funny, because it's just like kind of almost like being a kid again. I mean, it's like I think humans, we are just as much as we don't want to talk about like tribalism and things like that, like we are social animals, we are group animals, and yeah, we feed off of each other. So we have to be feeding off the good stuff if we want, to make changes, like good changes.
And I want to be careful if you're listening to this. I don't mean being the same. Synchronized doesn't mean being the same. We need to be different. Could you imagine if we convinced everybody to be the same? Oh my God, we'd be killing each other. It would be nuts, right? Oh, we need all Democrats. What are you kidding? Who wants that, right?
No, we want a balance. We
don't want all Republicans. We don't want all Democrats. We don't want all of anything. I mean, we think we want to cure cancer, but every time we fix something, we create another problem. We cure all illness and disease. Now nobody dies. That's a problem.
Yeah,
right.
That's a big problem.
We now have a food problem and a population problem. Who gets to have kids, right? So there's always a balance. Now, on what I told one of the leaders yesterday, I said, what's really interesting, and I don't get upset when they don't take the cards. I just go pick them up because I pay for them. I'm going to give them to somebody who wants them, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you say I don't want that card, great, then I don't want you to take it. It's fine. But I said that's the people you need to go watch. You need to go out in the field and see these people work, and maybe they work really good together, but you need to create clear expectations for the group that isn't willing to be curious and interested enough to try the experiment that I'm offering. And if that rain, I don't know. Anyway,
I don't know. I'm in Illinois and you're in New York, okay. So yeah.
Anyway, I said, so if you create great expectations for them, I said, then I'm going to tell you my core value, and I've told you before. When we're helping others become the best version of themselves, we're being the best version of ourselves. And I tell linemen that, and they think I'm it's a little weak, right? That's not a strong. Yeah. And then I said, well, the second part of that is our actions are moving pictures of our beliefs. So that's a challenge to me. My actions have to match my core values. And I said, here's where it's not weak. Listen, we created expectations, and it's clear, right? Yeah, and you're having trouble making those, obviously, and you're uncomfortable with them and a little frustrated. And they say, yeah. I said, well, you're good at what you do, and I want you to continue to be good at what you do. I just want you to do it someplace where you feel like you fit, because we're trying to create a culture here and you don't fit it. And in order for you to be the best version of yourselves, you need to surround yourself with people like you. Mm-hmm. So please, I'll give you a week to go find where that is. Does that sound weak to you? I just fired somebody using my core value, right?
Yeah.
And it's as polite as I can be, and I've done it. And usually when you create an expectation and people know they're not, and they're frustrated, they're glad, because they just can't seem to get in the jive. And I'm going to tell you, those people in your company, if you're listening to me right now, you have them in your company right now. You have the guy that's saying, I'm just here for my paycheck, dude. It's not his fault. The industry has created that guy, right? But he can't stay. He can't be on any of your teams. If he can't get into the game, he can't go to the Olympics as a synchronized swimmer, okay? If you have a group of guys that are, they're really cliquey and they're off on their own and they're cool, but it's not cool to do what you're telling them, they can't stay, because it's not coincidence that they're all doing the same. It's contagious, because they're releasing the wrong biology in each other. So I'm really passionate about this. I hope I'm not talking too much and giving you enough time here, Kate.
No, I'll cut you off. I have no problem with that.
but the way forward has to do with creating continuity in our teams, because we are a line team, as Brent says, right?
Mm-hmm. Brent Jeffries.
Yeah, Brent Jeffries
guy.
Yeah. We are a line team, and if somebody is not on your team, so let me go a step further. We watch in the Olympics right now, and these athletes are working at their highest potential. It's really amazing. And if they make a mistake, they get a score point off. Mm-hmm. Our industrial athletes go to work every day in an Olympic event every day, and it isn't score points. It's fingers and hands and arms and burns. They've got to be at their highest potential, and the people around them have to be at that potential. In order for the people around you to be at the same potential as you, you have to connect with them, because our biology is contagious. When you're doing well, I'm doing well. When you're doing bad, I'm doing bad. When I got that guy that is getting angry, he's releasing the wrong or frustrated. He comes back from talking to his manager, and his manager said, "Look, you guys, you got to hurry up. We got a timeline. You got to get going. Got to get going." And now he's like, "Oh, he's pissed, right?" And now that manager doesn't know it, but when that incident happens, it will never trace back to him. Our root cause analysis is not that strong. It doesn't come back to the manager who pushed the wrong biology in his team. This doesn't happen. So this is why it's going to be hard. I get it. I get that it's hard to be an Olympic athlete every day on the job. Yeah. That's why we need to be synced with each other.
Bill, thank you so much for your time today. We've covered, I think, a lot here. I just want to know if there are any last reminders, anything else you want to say, any questions you want to pose to the audience before we let you go.
Well, yeah. So we've talked about roles and concerns before on other podcasts. That's just a simple tactic to put people in a circle at the end of the job brief and re-identify your role and any concern you have. Because when you have a greater pool of concerns, you have a greater pool of predictions of unwanted outcomes. And it also synchronizes, right? So that's just an action. That's a 3-minute thing to try. And the most important thing is for the team to test and evaluate that and see what happens. You have to take my word for it. But I can guarantee them if they don't try it, nothing will change, right? Yes. Because you need an action. So I think if you were to ask a question, I would say that almost anybody speaking or anybody writing or anybody even coming on your podcast, a question for them would be, this really interesting information, motivational, whatever information you're giving me, what small tangible thing will change on Monday at work as a result of what you're telling me? What small thing can you give us to change, to apply the concepts that you're telling us today for people to apply to themselves at work on Monday? So for them to test and evaluate. Is that a reasonable question, or is that too vague?
No, I think that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do here is what are we doing to try to change things? We've got we've got tons of information, tons of studies, great PPE, the hierarchy of control, the energy wheel, all the things. So what are we doing now with all of that stuff going forward to connect people and make us safer, right?
Yeah. I asked the last group without the manager's permission, and I apologized to him later. I said, listen, for every meeting that you attend from now on in your career, you are the sharp end of the work. When you have a meeting, you should ask this question politely at the end. You should say, look, I really enjoyed this. This is really interesting information. I've got a lot of take-home ideas, but tell me, what one thing would you have us do differently on Monday as a result of this great meeting? And I told the manager later, and he said, yeah, you kind of put me on the spot. I said, good.
I think that's a little bit of the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time today. I also want to thank our listeners for spending their valuable time with us. So join me and Bill again soon for our next episode of Influencing Safety. And in the meantime, stay safe and be well.
Howdy, partners. The IP Utility Safety Conference is hightailing into Dallas, Texas this October 22nd through the 24th. Register today at utilitysafetyconference.com.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.